Welcome back. This video will cover Learning Objective 1.4 of Chapter 1 for PSY 235 Social Psychology. In this final section of Chapter 1, we're going to talk about why it is that social psychology and the study of it is important. So what difference does it make, as your authors put it, whether our behavior has its roots in the need to protect self-esteem or the desire to feel like we understand what's going on around us? At its most basic level, we all do the work of social psychology every single day, whether we are engaged in behaviors immediately with real live people or whether we're just thinking about our social relationships. We're trying actively or passively to make sense of ourselves and to make sense of other people, for both reasons, for the self-esteem reason as well as for the cognitive reason of wanting to feel like the world makes sense. We all live in social environments. Even during the height of the pandemic, when we were locked down inside of our houses and rarely went out, we're still socially engaged. We think about other people all the time. We think about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and we try to make sense of it. I'm thinking, I don't watch it. I'm not a reality TV fan at all, but I know people who are. This whole Love Island thing from this year has kind of dominated a lot of conversations, and I kind of relate it to this. We are absolutely obsessed with other people's social relationships, and we're obsessed with our own. We all live in this social environment, and we are called upon, in order to keep maintaining those social relationships, it behooves us to be good judges of why we do what we do, why we feel what we feel, why we think what we think, and it also makes really good sense that human beings would be adept at determining why other people do what they do. You know, from an evolutionary standpoint, you need to know what people are thinking, or at least think you know what they're thinking, to protect yourself. You know, when is another person a threat to you? When are they lying? When are their intentions good? When are their intentions bad? We all live in a social environment, and we all work really hard to build skills in these self-perception areas as well as our perceptions of others. We're all curious about how we are influenced by our social context and how we can influence others in those social contexts. So we are both people exposed to social influence, and we are social influencers. We impact other people. So all of the questions that we're going to consider, all the topic areas that we're going to look at over the course of the semester, you know, how do you persuade people to do what you want them to do? How do you persuade them to change their behaviors? How do you get someone to like you? How do you know if someone likes you? When is your aggression or your anger justified? When is it not? When is another person going to hurt you? When are they going to help you? Those are all kind of context, just examples of context where understanding the social nature of those interactions is really important. So social psychology gives us theoretical frameworks for studying these kinds of problems so that we can understand them better. Many social psychologists come to the field because they perceive in their world problems to be solved. So, for example, if you go back to the early history of social psychology, a lot of the really important early theorists were actually people who fled Nazism during World War II, fled Europe, ended up in Western Europe, in parts of the UK, or they ended up in the United States. And then in their studies, in their work, they were really thinking, how can we make sure bad things like a Holocaust don't happen again? So a lot of the early framework of studying prejudice and discrimination was directly motivated by the experiences of World War II and a desire to understand why it happened, to use theories and arguments, and then use science to test hypotheses to create solutions to those problems. By the time we get to the very last chapter in our text at the end of the semester, where we talk about prejudice, you should have a pretty good handle on the way in which many social psychologists are very problem-oriented. And they see a social problem and they're like, we can bring theory to that and we can test it and maybe we can make the world a better place. Now in this clip, you're going to see a social psychologist talking about why social psychology matters in their own words.
I've been in this field now for more than 30 years, and I like it just as much now as I did when I started. I think that's pretty cool. And why is that? Well, partly because the subject matter of social psychology is all the stuff that interests me. And so social psychology gives me the tools and to answer sort of questions about the human condition that I've always wanted to know about. What I love about social psychology is that it allows us to be both the scientist and the subject. It allows us to understand ourselves in a different way by doing experiments on human behavior that allow us to better understand why we behave the way we do.
Another aspect of social psychology that is really unique is that we can also apply what we know to understanding things like elections and election outcomes. We can apply it to policy. So we can work at things at the macro level. And unlike most disciplines, social psych is that gateway. You can go up a level, you can go down a level, and you can actually integrate all three levels to make a change in the world.
I think for me, the fact that you can understand human behavior through experiments, through science, was I just had a wow reaction to it. And especially, I think, as an 18-year-old, when the findings were counterintuitive, when it didn't fit with what my hunch was. And that, to me, just blew me away.
And over time, I realized although social psychology has a lot of fun intellectually, it's great to do experiments and collect data and verify your theories, and it's a good process. It's also really gratifying to be able to apply those theories and find that you can take the data that's collected in the laboratory sometimes, in which you think this has no practical implications. But it turns out it does, that it has great value for solving specific problems.
One of the things that I think is so great about this particular field of psychology is how relevant it is to so many different domains of life. So social psychology, in a sense, reinvents itself in new domains.
If you bring 5 social psychologists together on anything, we'll never agree. But that's the beauty of it, because I always learn from my disagreements with people. And so what I like is about the way we do the work that we do, that we're open to different views, that we learn from one another, that we continue to reinforce one another, both by agreeing but by disagreeing with one another. So I think that the field has a real opportunity for intellectual and personal growth just by the way we do things.
So I think social psychology is alive and well, and it's increasingly relevant for today's world. So I think it has a robust future ahead. I like the fact that our work has impact. That's what keeps it exciting now. You're going to love this field, and you're going to love this class. That's what I tell my students on the first day. You're going to love this class, and you're going to remember it. I get letters from students that I had decades earlier saying, I'm still using stuff I learned in this class. So you're going to love it.
And that concludes my coverage of Chapter 1.